Hello, and welcome to the Unpack podcast. Thanks for joining us today to hear a little bit about the realities in today's public schools. Today, I'm joined by Greg Melinda, the Technical Assistance Director at Ingham Intermediate School District. Say hello to everyone, Greg.
Hello, everybody.
We're going to talk a little bit today about IEPs and 504 plans and how they support students in our schools. So today, we'd like to start with talking a little bit about the foundational differences between what an IEP is and what a 504 plan is and how those work for our kids. Could you start just explaining what is an IEP and what is a 504?
Sure. I'm going to start by going back in time just a little bit.
You feel free to. We love that.
So if we think about why these laws came about, it's because a lot of our students before these laws were in place didn't have access to education. So a lot of our students with disabilities were not allowed to be in public schools. So it's a civil rights piece of legislation that is trying to provide access for students with disabilities to get an education.
That's fantastic. Thanks for that background, because that's important. People don't realize that. They don't understand.
It is. Both of these were enacted in the 70s.
Okay.
An IEP, that comes from a piece of legislation called the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA. It's had a couple different names over the years, but this is the one that people know it by. And then the 504 plan comes from the Rehabilitation Act, another piece of civil rights that was focused on adults with disabilities. When we take a look at both of these laws, they do different things. So IEPs and IDEA, that is definitely going to focus more on schools.
Okay.
In Michigan, we look at birth through age 26.
That's our age group for special ed.
Correct. For IDEA and IEPs. For 504 plan, that's actually lifetime.
It's a very big difference, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So an IEP, for example, is not going to follow you to a university. That is just K-12 education, where a 504 plan might.
Okay.
If you've got a disability and you need some accommodations in a university setting, a 504 plan might be appropriate. But there is no mechanism where you could get an IEP at a university. There's no mechanism that you can get an IEP at a job site. But you can have a 504 plan at a job site. Because it's a piece of civil rights legislation, it's about providing access to somebody with a disability. Those are the laws that guide and define us. But when we look at eligibility for this, you need to have a disability. How we define that is different between both of those pieces of law.
Well, that's some really good background. So maybe you could start by breaking down IDEA a little bit, but really talk about how that works into the IEP plan for a student and,
Sure.
How they work together, how the law supports their learning but their learning and their access.
So IDEA is one of the most complex federal laws out there. If somebody tells you they know everything that's in IDEA, I don't know if I'd believe them. I look things up and I'm considered an expert. But I think when you look things up, it's because you want to confirm your own knowledge. Taking a look at what's required in IDEA, how that works with schools, it depends what age group you're looking at, because there are different requirements for birth to 3 federally, and then there are for 3 years old to 21.
Okay.
It depends on the needs of the students, the age group, the disability. So IDEA is disability-based, meaning you've got to determine that a student has a disability and a need for supports and a need for specially designed instruction. So specially designed instruction is what we define special education as.
Okay.
And that means we're tailoring independent or individualized instruction to meet a student's needs to hopefully give them access to the general education. If not access to the general education, we're defining goals that a student's working on to help improve their life.
That's fantastic. So now when you say access to the general education, do you mean general education curriculum or classrooms or both?
Both.
Both. Okay, great. Thank you for clarifying that. So what does it look like when a group comes together to create an IEP for a student? Can you talk a little bit about that, what the team looks like?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Love that. So an IEP is defined, or the members are defined by law.
Okay.
Who needs to be there? Who is required to be there? So parents are required first to be involved. We can't compel a parent to attend a meeting, but we absolutely have to invite them.
Okay.
Parents need to have the ability to be there. So we can do things like we can do it via phone, we can do it via Zoom, Teams meeting, whatever.
Just as long as they're involved, right? To
Yep.
keep them engaged in that whole process.
Absolutely. And parents are a vital part of this team. Parents are the historian.
Right.
I might have a child for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. They've got them for a lifetime.
Yeah.
They're going to know things that have been tried in the past and whether they worked or didn't work. And we need that voice in this meeting. That's one voice. Students can be another voice, depending on their ability, developmentally where they're at. It's going to be a great difference between a 3-year-old
Right.
and an 18-year-old.
Yeah.
So that's why the law is written flexibly to say, here's what we do for a 3-year-old, here's what we do for an 18-year-old. We need general education teacher if general education is being considered.
Okay.
So if we have a student in a center-based school like Hartwood or Beekman, and they're doing great there, and we don't need to consider switching schools or going somewhere else, we can say that general education teacher is not required.
Okay.
But if there is any consideration to going back to their home district, to going to a general education building, we must invite a general education teacher.
Well, that makes sense. So that you're making sure you're connecting all the dots. Or the
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We also need to invite a special education teacher. So that can be a provider like a speech and language pathologist. It can also be a classroom teacher.
Okay. Okay.
We want that special education voice to say, here's how we're going to adapt instruction, here's how we're going to modify, and here's some goals we can work on.
Okay.
We need what's called a MET representative or an evaluation team representative.
Okay.
Because when you qualify for special education, that's through testing. Test in, test out, which means you test in to qualify, you test out to move away from special education.
Okay.
With the evaluation team representative, that can also be the special education teacher. It could be somebody like a school psychologist, a speech and language pathologist. That person is there to interpret educational evaluations.
Okay. So someone who is an expert in the needs of the child.
Yes.
Great.
We also need a district representative, public agency representative. That person is the person with the checkbook in their hands. They're also the person who's knowledgeable of the continuum of supports available to a student. And they're the person who essentially has the final say in the meeting of here's what the district is prepared to offer to provide supports for this child.
Okay.
Absolutely required. And if we're working with transition age students, we have to consider inviting an outside agency, an organization like Michigan Rehabilitation Services, to create a plan for what do we do after school.
Okay. So after they're aging out and after have reached the level of the system that supports them, they're now going to be an independent adult of some sort.
Yes.
Great.
So that kind of gives an idea of who should be there or who's required to be there. But if you've been at an IEP meeting, it can be a lot more people.
So that's a pretty big team.
Yes.
That's a pretty big team. And that team supports the child through their learning different ages, right? The team may change up from year to year, but for the most part, the consistency in that is going to, of course, be the parents and the students and hopefully some type of education support that's there, for the years.
But think of yourself as a parent in that situation, how intimidating that can be for that first meeting.
Yeah.
These are all people who are special education experts, have studied for this, and to support your child, you've never probably gone through special education training.
Right.
That's a heavy burden on a parent. And I think we as special educators, the better we understand that, the better we can communicate with families and provide good supports for children.
Yeah, it's really important that we have a welcoming environment for them so that they feel like we're working together.
Yes.
Okay, great.
With a 504 plan, the requirements are going to be different. Typically it's going to be a counselor.
Okay.
Could be a social worker, could be a teacher. It's whoever the district designates as their coordinator.
Okay.
And they're looking at supports differently. So in an IEP, we're looking at that specially designed instruction, which is special education. We're looking at accommodations. We're looking at programming, all of those different supports. With a 504 plan, typically, we're only looking at accommodations.
Okay. That's a very good differentiator there.
So if a student needs specially designed instruction or to be presented information in a different way, that should be a key trigger to say, ooh, we should look at specially designed instruction. We should look at special education.
Okay. So what are some misunderstandings about 504 plans versus IEPs? You just talked about the differences between them, but Sometimes those lines get blurred. What are some common misunderstandings?
I can tell you my least favorite one that I hear is calling a 504 plan an IEP junior
Oh
or
my goodness.
or
Okay.
or treating it like a consolation prize. So let's say a student is going through the evaluation process and we determine that the student doesn't need specially designed instruction. So one of the phrases a person might hear is, well, at least you can still qualify for a 504 plan. But as we already said, this is a piece of civil rights,
Right.
two
Right.
separate laws.
Right.
It's not a consolation prize.
Mm-hmm.
This is the level of supports that the student needs. The student only needs accommodations. They don't need instruction as well. That's okay.
Right.
It's okay to only need additional time or a quiet place to work. We all need those things
Right.
on different days, but some students need them every day.
Right. Right. So, what would you say to a parent who is thinking about their child's needs? What would be their first step to find some support?
You're going to reach out to one of the educators at your school.
Yep.
Whether or not that's a paraprofessional, a teacher, a principal, a counselor, a social worker, whoever you're comfortable talking with and expressing yourself and saying, I'm worried.
Okay.
As a special education director, when I was in a local doing that, it was one of my favorite times to meet with families.
Yeah.
I would start by saying, I hear that you're concerned about your child. I hear that you're concerned about their academic performance or their behavioral performance. You're worried. Here's what I'm going to tell you. I'm not going to say we're going to get your child an IEP. What I'm going to say is we're going to find a plan of support. That could be something formal like an IEP, be something formal like a 504 plan. Could also be something informal like let's get some extra support down the hallway or let's find a quiet spot to work after lunch. But what I hear you saying is you're worried about your child. We as a school district will help you come up with a plan.
Yeah. And test some things, right? Figure
Absolutely.
out what's really going to work for that child and that parent. Okay. Okay. That's great. That's great. Well, I think that's all we have time for today. We'd love to have you on the show again later. So, somewhere down the road, we'll think of some other ways to bring you back. But thank you for joining us today and unpacking the realities in today's public schools.
Thank you for the opportunity.